Everyone hits a bump in the road. What do you do with it? Be inspired as we explore the ways people experience, navigate, and manage the ups and downs and twists and turns in this road trip called life. Welcome to another episode of Bump in the Road. The basic podcast is always free. We also have a premium subscription called Bump 2 that lets you listen in on extended behind-the-scenes conversations with our guests. Check it out at www.bumpintheroad.us. Savio Clemente is an author, a coach, a podcaster, and so much more. A diagnosis of B-cell lymphoma sent his life on a path to help others. His website, thehumanresolve.com, is full of great information, and his recent book, I Survived Cancer and Here Is How I Did It, is an Amazon bestseller. Please welcome Savio to Bump in the Road. Savio, welcome to Bump in the Road. If you would, tell our audience a little bit about you.
Yes, thank you so much, Pat, for inviting me to talk today. So hi, everyone. My name is Savio P. Clemente. I'm a board-certified wellness coach. I'm a #1 best-selling author. I'm a syndicated columnist, podcaster, and also a stage 3 cancer survivor. I was diagnosed in 2014 with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, specifically diffuse large B-cell lymphoma. The way it sort of worked was prior to that cancer diagnosis in 2014, I was living in terms of a very optimal lifestyle. I was meditating 6 to 7 days a week. I was working out 5 to 6 days a week. I was eating organic foods, hormone-free foods. I practiced what I preached in terms of give as you shall receive, in terms of energy for energy. But that happened to me. And the way it sort of started was I noticed a couple of night sweats where my bed sheets were like really drenched. And then my stomach started getting distended. And I knew I'm a male. I was born male at birth. And I knew it wasn't pregnant or anything of that sort. And then I did go on a trip with a friend. And I noticed my bed sheets once again were all soaked. I went on that trip. It was to Europe, came back. And then about a week later, I decided to go visit my naturopath, who I'd been seeing for about, I would say, over a decade. And he goes, Savio, something is really wrong here. Seriously, like I'm looking at like 3 or 4 different things that could be wrong. He said, you really need to go to mainstream medicine and see what's going on. I went to go get a sonogram. They would not let me leave the office for about an hour and a half. Finally, after an hour and a half, they told me to have a family member come pick me up, which I thought was strange because I had my own car. Sure enough, I went to the hospital or went to the nearest doctor. They admitted me to the 5th floor. I was told about a day later that I would be transferred to the 7th floor, which is the cancer floor. And that's when I was told I had diffuse large B-cell lymphoma.
That's a terrifying diagnosis to get.
Yes, it's considered really aggressive. I was bedridden for about a week, and then the extra week, so I stayed in the hospital for 2 weeks. The extra week, I basically, they put a nephrostomy tube in me. They had to distill about 5 liters of fluid from my abdomen. I got a bone marrow aspiration as well. And I remember the medical director looking straight deadpan in my face and saying, you need to start chemo. She goes, we do know from you telling us that you barely even took aspirin before this situation. But I'm telling you right now, you're really sick. And if you do not start it, I don't know what to say it's going to happen to you. So I listened to my inner voice and I decided I don't know if you watch the movie, but the movie Little Buddha, the scene flashed before my eyes. And it was the scene where they were on the boat and the Buddha, Siddhartha, is meditating and he hears 2 people in a boat and they say, if you play the drum too much, it will break. And if you play it too slow, it won't play at all. And I remember hearing, find the middle way. This is like literally what I was hearing. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do that. And so I did. I did 6 rounds of chemo over the course of like 3.5 months. And then in between that, I did a whole host of integrated modalities. What
sort of integrative medicine did you turn to?
Sure. So I did ozone therapy, which has been used in Germany for many years. So I did IV ozone. I bought an ozone generator, a small one. I did ozone water as well. I read the Quran, and in the Quran, there was a passage in there that says there's only one thing that the black seed oil cannot cure, and that's death. So I did some black seed oil. I got pure black seed oil from London. I mixed it with honey. I had that. My diet was okay, so that really wasn't, wasn't an issue. I did red light therapy. I did energy medicine. So I had a little device. It's called a Rife. It's a mini Rife device. And I did energy medicine as well. So an acupuncturist. I know what people are thinking, this is a lot of money, and it was, but it was either that or death. And for me, I was like, I'm going to spend whatever I need to. I wanted to just say for myself that as long as I did what I could, then the rest is up to me. So I remember early December of 2014, after my 6 rounds of chemo, that whatever happens at this point, whatever my scans show is what it is. And fortunately for me, it showed that it was clear and there was no evidence of disease, and I was in remission.
Did you get much pushback from the traditional medical community with what you were doing?
So that's interesting. You asked me, Pat. I've not disclosed that with any of my traditional doctors. I didn't tell them at all because I felt it was my body, my choice. I wasn't hurting anyone. And for me, it felt right. And I just didn't want to have any pushback from them. I was still doing their protocols and their regimes. I was still listening to what they were telling me to do. I was still doing the chemo. And I just felt I didn't want to muddy the conversation. And I didn't want to have um, any negativity directed towards my decision making.
Yeah, no, I also used some alternative approaches when I was going through chemo, and I hit so much resistance. You were much smarter than me. I think it's wise to just keep it to yourself, sadly.
Yeah, I mean, I just, what I felt, because with the chemo that I had to do, you had to wait 2 to 3 weeks in order to get the second round of chemo, or the third round, the fourth round. And so for me, I felt, well, as long as I'm not muddying, like I'm not doing it on the same week, I'm doing it on opposite weeks, that there was no reason why I didn't advocate for myself. And, when I did some of these treatments, they were doctors as well. And I told them, I said, I'm not really going to say anything about my oncologist. And they're like, that's really your choice, whether or not you want to say something. So,
How did cancer change your life path, and did it have a message for you?
yeah, it definitely had a message. It taught me this idea of vulnerability. I was never really good at that. I'm someone who has traveled 6 continents by myself. I'm someone who is a go-getter. I keep to myself. I'm kind of secretive in a way. And it really taught me that, no, you need someone after 5 or 6 hours in a chemo bed. You need someone to pick you up. You actually do need that. You were in the hospital for 2 weeks. You lost about 18 pounds. You need someone to cook for you because you probably are just not interested in cooking for yourself. You need to let people support you, and you need to let people worry about you and not always try to be so strong. So that's definitely one thing. What huge thing that it taught me. It also taught me this idea between feelings and emotion. I'm a Pisces. I'm an Aquarius cusp and all that stuff. I'm a very feeling person, but I don't think I processed the emotional aspect of cancer. I took cancer as a challenge, and I focused like a laser beam on trying to overcome that challenge. But I didn't really let it sink into my bones. I didn't let it sink into my heart. I didn't really do it until years later when I attended a men's retreat.
I think it takes years to process it. It's a really complex experience. What are some of the things that came out of it for you?
So a lot in terms of being really open to kind of like testing my might, so to speak. Like there's a like people, and it's a controversial word in cancer. It's like fight, and some people don't like the word fight because people who have lost the battle. But for me, it really taught me sort of this idea of figuring out for myself, well, does fight mean an actual like go getting, or it does fight mean relying on self? And one of the things that I also was sort of feeling was, and what came to me was, like, to know thyself is to heal thyself. And I'm like, well, what is cancer trying to maybe perhaps teach me? I mean, it's horrible, but what is it trying to show me? And in reflection, I would say during that time, I was going through a business partnership with a bunch of people, and it was just really not positive. And there was a deluge of things that I just really didn't process well. And I thought I was someone who's like really physically or just like responsible, even physically responsible, but I don't think I was. So it really sort of taught me to like really listen deeper within. And that's really where my trajectory goes with my own coaching in terms of embodiment, using the body as a resource to ferret out information, for yourself.
I think the energy that we surround ourselves with in terms of people and outlook is really important.
100%. And to some degree, I don't think I asked for what I wanted. I don't think I was verbalizing my own needs. I was just going with the flow, thinking, well, if I just don't say anything, then it will work itself out. Or if I don't say anything, I won't ruffle any feathers. But I've learned that there's great purpose in the darkness. And the darkness shown me that you probably were really good with quote unquote living a spiritualized or a spiritually focused lifestyle, but you weren't really good about living in the physical material world. You weren't really good about confronting things. You weren't really good about saying what you wanted and what you didn't want. And it came in the form of cancer for me. And I'm just so happy that I found a way through that. I mean, I'm realistic. As much as I am a very spiritually inclined person, I'm also a realist, and I know cancer can always come back. And so I live with that. I live with that duality all my, every day.
It's really hard to live with that risk of recurrence. What do you do to try to manage it?
It's so interesting because I coach cancer survivors, and this is a topic that comes up all the time. And you know what? I think it's just saying to yourself, um, as long as you do your part. So, like in other words, as long as I take responsibility for my, wellness routine, as long as I take responsibility for my mental health, as long as I take responsibility for my relationships with other people, I think the rest is really not something you can control. It's like, Janet Jackson, I'm dating myself here, said it best when she talked about control back in the day, because with cancer, there is no control.
Yeah, I totally agree. And there's really no control in life in general. I think the only answer I've come up with is to be intensely present. And in being intensely present, there's no past, there's no future, but you're here now and you're living your life. And I don't know, I think that may be the best we can do.
Yeah, I that and then coupled with breath. I'd never realized how breath, being focused on and being really um, sort of sort of centered around breath, can really change your outlook. Like even when I worry about stuff, if I focus on breath, it brings me back to a state of calm. And so I would say absolutely those things go hand in hand.
I was looking at your website and you talk about 7 energy centers. Let's talk about those a little bit. The first one is mental.
Yeah. So obviously, mental health is a big thing, due to the rise of COVID and just generally life and challenges and world political, strife that we all are going through. Yeah, it's I call them 7 energy centers because obviously they're rooted in chakra systems. Some people think that that's a little too woo woo, or some people are like, I'm not into yoga. And so, really, for me, it's just the energetic sort of aspect of it. But yeah, mental, the mental body, and I also speak in my coaching also about something called the 3 brains, which is the head, heart, and gut, which, in embodiment circles, and there is sort of clearer evidence nowadays that they do have a consciousness. It vibrates some type of energy. It gives you information of some kind if you really, really pay attention to the feeling and the sensation of it.
I think if you have congruence between your head, heart, and gut, you're heading in the right direction.
100%. Absolutely. And actually, they say the gut is really can supersede the head, that the gut and is like sort of the strength of courage. And then the heart actually sort of has a bigger overpowering sort of influence on ourselves. People think it's the opposite, but it really isn't.
No, I think one of the things that's interesting, you may call it woo, but the reality is life is not linear. We live in this linear material world where you go to this school, you get this job, you drive this car, whatever the path is. But that's not really life. Life is very nonlinear, and I think the only way to navigate it is with our head, heart, and gut, our senses, a sense of spirituality. I think that we're living in. I think we have the wrong paradigm set up.
Yeah. Well, how whatever your belief system is, I was always pretty much taught. I was always interested in the deeper meaning of things. I grew up Catholic, but I always knew there was more information that I needed to glean, and so I studied different belief systems, comparative religions. And one of the things that's very certain in a lot of the texts is the fact that this is a school. This is a school of learning of some kind, and it took me a while, but like I'm getting the hang of living a human life. I know that sounds funny to most people, but like living in the physical material world having that human experience has been a challenge for me. And I'm very honest about that.
I think it's a challenge for everybody, but everybody doesn't look within. I mean, if you can look at all the bumps that can happen in life and treat them as a learning experience, it's a very different journey than if you just plow through and keep going.
Yeah, I think intentionality has a lot to do with it. And also sometimes with that comes responsibility, right? So if you know something is wrong, then you have to take responsibility for changing it. And some people don't want to even go there because it requires too much responsibility, too much effort, too much pain, too much sorrow.
I think it's the change. People are really terrified of change.
Yeah.
I No, go ahead.
No, no, please.
Well, no, I bring this up a lot, but it's just so profound. It has always stuck with me. When I interviewed Eric Weinmayer, he went blind at, I think, 14 years old, climbed Everest, 7 summits. I mean, he's just done amazing. Started No Barriers, not for profit. He's done some amazing things. But he divides the world into 3 groups: quitters, which are self evident, campers who just like the status quo, and then very few people are climbers. Now, climbers can become campers. These are not exclusive in any way. But I think the majority of people, particularly in the cancer community, really are campers. They don't want to challenge things too much, even after an extraordinary brush with mortality. I don't have an answer for that.
Yeah, in my studying, so I'm board certified. I'm also ICF certified, which means nothing to the general public. But in the coaching world, those are pretty big deals. But one of the things that really struck me is learning about the trans theoretical model. It's called the stages of change, and it posits that people are not resistant to change. They just don't know how to move through the stages of change, and that's where they need assistance, either from a coach or a mentor or someone else, because those changes from contemplative to action to maintenance requires hand-holding to a degree. But it's not like people don't want to get to quote unquote the promised land or to their ideal action. They just don't know what steps are necessary for that solution to be fully self-realized.
What are some of the steps?
So there's the sort of contemplative, right? I want to change. There's sort of this aspect of like deeper understanding of, well, what is required of me to actually make those changes. Then there is sort of, okay, I made the change. I'm maintaining the change. And then always there's sort of the slip up of like, okay, well, I went in the wrong direction. How do I get back to it? And so that's like the action phase, right? How do I become more actionable in that? And then if you're someone who can sort of have that change process happen for you over the course of, let's say, 5 years, you're in sort of what they call like a state of equilibrium, right? To a change where that temptation of change doesn't really happen for you. And I really was struck by that because I was looking back in my own life. Like I'm okay with change, even cancer. Like people like you bounce back so quickly, and maybe that's just me. I don't know, but in looking back at other people's lives, I've been a long time observer. I've always been really observant, quiet as well, and I've noticed that actually is very true. A lot of people really didn't understand what is required of the change. They just thought that the change is like winning the lotto, right? It's just going to happen. And that's not the way it sort of works. That's not where human conditioning works. That's not where human development works. That's really, it's a process, and it takes time to work through those. They're like what I call like spider webs or cobwebs.
Well, and I think it requires looking within, which is not something that our society is really inclined towards.
Yeah. Well, we're just focused on really like the end result and not focused on what energy it takes and what intention it takes in order to get there.
Or how interesting the path might be.
Absolutely. I mean, if you can go in every day with wonder and with curiosity, which I try my best to do every day, I think you'll be very surprised what might come up.
I think curiosity is one of the critical elements in terms of navigating a heartfelt life.
100%. For me, I've been curious about space. I write this on my website that I've had a childhood fantasy about exploring outer space. I mean, that's pretty out there. But I think curiosity really sort of lends itself to what Margaret Mead did when she was an anthropologist. And, she would go to different cultures. She wouldn't judge it. She would just record, observe, and just report on her findings. And I think that's the essence of curiosity. It's not about figuring out connections. It's just about observing and seeing what lands.
And that goes to non-judgment, another great Buddhist tradition.
100%. Absolutely.
Now, of the 7 energy centers, spiritual is the next one.
Yeah. Spirituality, I heard a long, long time ago, a really wise person once said, all path leads to God, but some are faster than others. It's not a judgment. It just means sometimes there are these things with certain belief systems that hold you down. And so in order to be free from them, you have to look at other wisdom, other ways or other avenues of individuals who have overcome. So spirituality is an individual choice. I never tell someone, I mean, like I said, I grew up Catholic. My family is still, devotedly Catholic. It's just something that someone has to kind of figure out for themselves. But I often say spirituality should be something that sees you as something that's bigger to a larger purpose.
Soul is the next energy center.
It's a hard one too, Pat, because soul really requires this sort of idea of thinking that there is more there's more after the death experience. And that's a controversial topic because no one really knows. It's not been 100% scientifically verified. But if you're someone of deep faith, you do feel and sense, and someone wrote this in the book where she had cancer when she was really young. And she mentioned, she looked at her mom, she's like, Mommy, am I gonna see you again? And she goes, don't worry, God is gonna, God has you. And the last line she puts in there, she goes, I'm someone of deep faith. I know where I'll go if it doesn't go the right way, which really was amazing.
Yeah, no, I've interviewed several people with near-death experiences, and it takes them maybe a decade or so to integrate the experience because it's so stunning, and then they start to talk about it. I find those experiences fascinating because they're definitely a pivot in somebody's life. Mary Neal said she went from hope to trust, which I found to be incredibly profound in terms of changing your life view.
Yeah, I think we live in a world where people want assurances. And since this is such a nebulous type of thinking or process, I know Hollywood has shown us a lot and books have taught us a lot, but no one really, really knows. And I think that's where faith comes in, because you'll never really, really know until that transition happens for you.
The other energy center, we have a few still, but emotional.
Emotion, well, like I said to you, it's a work in progress, even if you're someone who's a feeling person like myself. Yeah, that really requires you to really get in touch and not be afraid to express self. I think people get caught up in, their gender. People get caught up in, who they're supposed to be to family or friends, or who they're caught up to be for themselves, what they envisioned or pictured for themselves. And I think emotions are really like the pulse of what we wish to create in the world, what we wish to do in the world, what we hope for in the world.
Let's see. Vibrational. I like this one.
Yeah, vibrational is a tough one. That's like really about closeness, right? If you met someone and you're like, oh, that's really strange, I feel like an affinity. Or you meet someone and you're like, they gave me really, really, really weird vibes. Or even like if you enter like a place and you're like, oh, this feels a little creepy, or oh my God, this is so cool. I think it's just it's really being in tuned with your body and your space. And a lot of people do a lot of things for that. There's feng shui, where you can change, the orientation of your house. There's bashu, which is Indian, where they literally will break down walls and whatnot in order to create that harmonious space. So, vibrational is kind of in the realm of a little bit of woo-woo, because people often say, "Is my vibes a little freaky?" And it causes a great laugh. But for me, there's great evidence in actually being attuned to that.
Astral. Talk a little bit about astral. I'm not sure I completely get that one.
Yeah, so astral is sort of in the realm of what they call like esoteric spirituality or just generally, it's basically, your dreams. What's happening in your dreams? Are there messages? Is it something you ate? Is it did you lose a loved one and did they come in your dreams? It's trying to make meaning of things within, your dream. Astral also, to some, if people are into this kind of stuff, it also is, there's something called a silver cord, right? That attaches to your physical body. And it basically, when you're sleeping at night, or if you have a near-death experience, that cord severs, or that cord is still attached to you while you're still having these dreamlike states.
And physical seems obvious, but is it?
Yeah, well, physical is really tough. I think we're really good. I think as a society, we are really good at like looking really good or trying to look really good. But physical really means as well is like if something's bubbling up within you physically, like there's a pain or a sore, or like what is the root cause? And that's where acupuncture, right, comes in, because it talks about the meridians or the chi or the energy that's sort of locked in those. And physical, if you really think about it, a lot of disease is physical, right? It's like you have cancer, or you have diabetes, or you have, whole host of things. And I think that's the easiest for us to recognize when something's physically wrong with us. But I often say that there's always something beneath that, that carpet.
Now, your book just came out. Talk a little bit about it. You must be so proud. A book is such a big endeavor.
I am very proud. Thank you so much. Yeah. So the book the book is called "I Survived Cancer. Here's How I Did It." So basically, I'm a syndicated columnist, and I write for Authority Magazine and Thrive Global, and a little bit for BuzzFeed. And I basically interviewed nearly 175 cancer survivors over the course of 6 months. I chose 35 to highlight in my book, and I really wanted to highlight not only their stories, I told my own, but what we all learned spiritually, emotionally, physically, and mentally from the experience that really changed our worldview. I woke up the next morning, so it launched on the 22nd of February. I woke up the next morning and I was informed by my book promotions team that I hit the #1 bestsellers in 3 categories, in hardcover, in an ebook, and in new releases. It's doing fabulously well. I created a book trailer from it. I created a website as well. I'm getting into physical bookstores now. I'm doing a book tour as well. But really, at the end of the day, Pat, for me, and I told my editor this because it was really his idea for me to put it in book form. I'm not a child or a kid who wanted my name on a book. Like I'm not someone who needs like an ISBN number attached to my name, or needs my name flashed on a physical book. For me, I wanted people to want to get this book. I wanted someone to say to themselves, on day one, if I saw this book in my oncologist or hematologist office, it probably would have put me on a more emotionally secure path than I was. And for me, that's really is. I want to foster the conversation, and I want to tell the survivor's story.
What are some of the common threads that come out of the stories?
Cancer is not a death sentence. I heard that over and over again, and I actually made that a major theme in my book trailer, because I kept hearing that over and over again. Like, obviously, we all know that cancer can be a death sentence, but there are survivors like ourselves who are still here, still making a difference, and who are still living and trying to inspire other people to start living. So that was definitely #1. Probably say #2 is really having that support system. I didn't have it, so I can't speak from my own personal experience, but sort of this idea of your family members want to do something for you. They don't know how to broach the conversation. They don't know what to do. But if you bring them to a doctor's office, they could be the scribe. They could take down the information that you probably can't process as the doctor is telling you. Let them use them to lean on you, and vice versa, because you can get great strength from that. And probably in retrospect, I probably should have done that, but I didn't do it. I think a third one, which really struck me, was sort of this idea of not effing this up again. Like somehow I made it. I don't want to screw this up again. I'm given a second chance, and I got to make the most of it. There are some individuals in the book who had a 3% chance of living, 5% chance of living. I had 2 individuals that got cancer when they were really, really young. One of them, it came back a few years later. A whole host of things. A lot of breast cancer, unfortunately, because a lot of the women had it. But I would say those are probably the 3 main themes in it.
What other books do you like in the cancer or health genre?
I love Brene Brown. I love everything about her. I love the way she speaks. I love the way she writes. I love the way that she just addresses shame, and she addresses this idea of shame being something that you can sort of control, or that you can at least get a firm grasp on and not let it control you. And also, I really love where she talks about this idea of daring greatly, this idea of, if you're going to be in the arena, you're going to get your face marred, you're going to get stomped on, but she would rather live there than have a regret and not live there. So that's number one. I would say number two, I am a male, but I love the book Women, Food, and God by Deneen Roth. I loved when she spoke about food being like a panacea, or food being a way out of the emotion. And when you look and have a consciousness and a realization that food is just an energy source, not a source to placate, not a source to sort of bury your feelings and your experiences, that's when I find that you get great momentum and interest.
What, one of my favorite books that I always bring up when it comes to cancer is Anti-Cancer: A New Way of Life by David Servan Shriver. Have you come across that?
I've seen the title. I have not read it. No.
Okay, it's a must read. It's a combination of personal story and incredible scientific research. And I think it was originally published about 2007 or 8, and it's been updated, but the data is still very relevant. And he also tells his personal story, which is just stunning. Put it on your reading list because it's a good one.
Okay, I definitely will. Thank you.
What advice would you have for somebody facing cancer?
I would say a few things. I would say try to seek the normalcy in the situation. As chaotic and as fearful and as stressful as this, try to find ways so that your everyday can be as normal as possible, or your normal as possible. Because in the chaos is when you lose yourself. So I would say that's number one. Number two, do what I did. I literally focused like a laser beam and left no stone unturned. I looked at everything from medical journals, set up Google alerts, to speaking to people who had the experience, joining Facebook groups. Know the positive and the negatives of your cancer, and then try to find ways. And it's hard. What is this experience trying to teach you? Even if it's like a word or a feeling or a phrase, try to see if you can figure out that somehow, some way, because the answer does lie within, and you're the only one who can overcome this.
What did cancer teach you in addition to vulnerability?
I think cancer taught me that it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to also be part of a community. I mean, I saw cancer, and it might sound a little strange, as a shameful thing. I saw it like Hester Prynne, a scarlet letter, the big C on my chest. And to this day, Pat, my extended family doesn't know I had cancer in 2014, doesn't know I overcame. Yeah, only my nuclear family knows, my mom, my dad, my sisters. They wanted to tell everyone. They wanted them to come visit me in the hospital for 2 weeks. But I told them, no, I'm just, for what I felt in that moment was I was going to be a zoo animal, and they were going to come see me. Also, what I felt is this is not the end for me. Like, the doctors didn't say he's going to die. So I didn't want people to see this side of me. I didn't want people to see the guy who's literally basically bedridden, unless it was really dire, and it could have been. I think also cancer really taught me probably one of the greatest things, which is that we all have problems. And I know that sounds strange, but I was someone who wanted to fix problems. I wanted to overcome problems. I wanted to find ways to mitigate problems. And just living with the fact that I'm a cancer survivor, saying that actually verbalizing that, has been very empowering, even though I thought back then it was very defeating.
If you could rewrite your story, would you?
No, I wouldn't. I've tried to live by the golden rule the majority of my life. I've tried to do the best I can. I've faltered. I've definitely failed. Business failures, personal failures. I'm not really good at relationships. I'm very honest with that as well, like personal relationships. But I'm trying to get better. But no, I wouldn't rewrite it. And someone actually mentioned, like, would you want, because I attended a conference in Boston a few months ago, the Global Wellness Summit, and there was someone in there talking about his new book, and he's saying, we've advanced medicine and technology where now 90 is the new 60. And I'm like, people were looking around the room and they were like, and someone mentioned, I don't want to go back to, and I really wouldn't either. I wouldn't want to live my 20s again. They taught me great things and valuable things, but I'm comfortable being the age that I am now because I've learned through the hardship and through the pain and through the suffering and also through the joy and through the amazement and through the adventure. But yeah.
Thank you for joining us today. I hope you found something in today's podcast that inspires you along your own life's path, because sometimes a bump in the road is actually a portal into a more conscious and meaningful life. You can subscribe to our free podcast at www.bumpintheroad.us or become a premium member to hear the full conversation. Just go to www.bumpintheroad.us for more information and to sign up.